and power was given unto them over the fourth part of the earth, to kill with sword and with hunger and with death and with the beasts of the earth. That's Revelation 6:8. It seemed appropriate.
I'm glad some people are listening live, I hope. I forgot to start the recorder. We missed the first 5 minutes on the recording. Oh, I just realized that. Oh, man. I gotta get a producer.
We get here an hour earlier.
Yeah, I know.
So we ought to get
but you still got to press the button when you start, and I forgot to do that. So one thing I forgot to freaking do. Anyway, but, it's happening, folks. Don't think for a moment this can't happen here. The Jews in Germany thought it couldn't happen to them either during World War II, and it happened.
But they learned from their mistakes. They're pretty vigilant now. They're probably not going to let that happen again.
Well, let me tell you what happened. Speaking of vigilance, there was what date was it? This is dated yesterday, but this happened on July 25th. A group of anti-Israel protesters targeted Jewish-owned businesses in what they call a direct action in the Diamond District of New York City. That's 47th Street between 5th and 6th Avenues. The anti-Israel zealots screamed and blocked traffic as they made their way down the street. They yelled, "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free." In other words, they called for eliminating Israel. They chanted, "Resistance is justified when people are occupied. This means use violence as long as Israel exists." Store owners emerged from their businesses to see the commotion. The anti-Zionists became increasingly frenzied, screaming for intifada, which is a call to warlike violence so long as Israel exists. Intifada, intifada, free, free Palestine, intifada, intifada. And they scream, free, free Palestine over and over and over and over. God, it sounds like a now protest. Then something striking happened. Chants of Israel, Israel emerged. All of a sudden the business owners closed their stores and started to demonstrate for Israel. And then more and more people joined. Spontaneously, a counter-protest erupted to show solidarity with the Jewish state. They poured out from every direction onto the street.
I'm surprised Al Sharpton wasn't there with his megaphone on the Palestinian side.
I know. And it says, the Free Palestine zealots were left looking dazed and confused, their voices out of unison. Stray voices yelling, Allah, Allahu Akbar, but their hateful and vengeful, violent messages were drowned out by Israel, Israel. And it says, what else? Songs celebrating Israel broke out, chants denouncing barbarism. Hamas terrorists, Israel wants peace. And it says the crowd of Israel supporters kept growing. Chants of IDF rose up to support the Israeli Defense Forces, and everyone sang. I mean, this is very, it's very, to me, very promising.
Well, there's another article that goes right into that from The Guardian. The headline is "Anti-Semitism on Rise Across Europe in Worst Time Since the Nazis." It says, in just a space of 1 week last month, according to this article, there was an umbrella group of France's Jewish organizations, let me start that again. In the space of just 1 week last month, according to CRIF, the umbrella group for France's Jewish organizations, 8 synagogues were attacked. One in the Paris suburb of Sarcelles was firebombed by a 400-strong mob. A kosher supermarket and pharmacy were smashed and looted. The crowd's chants and banners included "Death to Jews" and "Slit Jews' throats." That same weekend, in the Barbès neighborhood of the capital, stone-throwing protesters burned Israeli flags. Israel read one banner. Well, anyway, and even while that's happening, there was a MSNBC talk show the other night, and these 3 clowns, what's her name? Harris Perry.
Oh, yeah, Melissa Harris Perry.
And who's the Middle Eastern guy? Gosh, I forget. I don't watch these guys enough to remember any of their names. Oh, you know who he is, Scott. Well, anyway, they were sitting around talking about how there is no anti-Semitism in the Middle East. How can you don't know anti-Semitism in the Middle East? What's the first thing that Egypt's guy Morsi,
yeah.
said when he took office. He said, "Death to Jews." That was the first thing he said, and he's the president of Egypt.
And the Hamas's charter, their main purpose for existing is to wipe Israel off the face of the earth.
Yeah, and they teach their children from the earliest age how to strap on bombs, and that Jews use the bloods of Christians and Muslims to make their matzah balls.
Yeah, I mean, it's ridiculous. But, that gave me some hope with the Jews in New York coming out against them. Another thing that did, and this absolutely surprised me, is the outcry in Hollywood against Penelope Cruz and Javier Bardem. I mean, sure, there's a lot of Jews that run the studios in Hollywood and everything, but you know what? I never really considered, the things they stood for in the past, I never thought I'd get this much outcry. I'd hear this much outcry from the studio heads and everything. I mean, it's huge. A lot of it's silent right now.
Well, a lot of the studio heads are Jewish, and I think it's finally hitting home with them that
that's what I'm saying,
this is serious stuff, and it could come home to roost for them here in the United States if they don't watch out.
And it wouldn't surprise me if they start blacklisting some of these people.
Hollywood's always on the wrong side of things. What is it with their romance with dictators and despots like Sean Penn going down to...
Not just Hollywood, but entertainment industry, period.
Whatever, whether it be rock and roll, the rock and roll industry or movies or whatever. They just have this romance with communist dictators. Communist dictators, and they just, period, they're just on the wrong side of almost every issue.
Yeah, I know. And you know what? And the thing that bugs me is that too many people listen to them.
Well, how is it, you make your living, you make millions and millions of dollars a year, more than anybody could ever hope to, any average person, yet you decry the very system that led you to that wealth and embrace things like communism. Really?
Yeah, exactly. Doesn't make any sense to me either. Where are you going to go with next after this?
Speaking of which, it's kind of on the same level. Who came out against American companies leaving the United States?
Oh, I got the article right here. I
Okay,
was going to say that for last, but
let's just set it up by stating America has the highest corporate tax rate in the world, and because of that, a lot of companies are fleeing. Walgreens, I think, is going to Ireland. I believe their headquarters is going to be Ireland.
I think they decided not to.
They didn't. Well, they were going to.
They're mentioned in this article.
Ireland has a 12% tax rate.
I think they were mentioned in this. I think they were mentioned in this article. This is from the Blaze. Glenn Beck on Thursday warned Americans to be extremely cautious of any new legislation preventing American companies from leaving the United States and corporate loyalty oaths, a concept advocated by Jonathan Alter at the Daily Beast in particular. Alter said in an article Monday that because unpatriotic, in quotes, companies like Walgreens are relocating outside the United States in record numbers to avoid high taxes, it is time to think, in quotes, creatively, a way to force them to remain. Alter's solution was to force companies to sign non-desertion agreements. President Obama should issue an executive order that says any company that wants to keep its federal contracts must sign a newfangled NDA, non-disclosure agreement, or desertion agreement, Alter wrote. But other companies with few or no federal contracts might be tempted to desert anyway. That's where the rest of us come in. Under my scheme, notice he says scheme.
I love that.
Alter continued, companies that sign non-desertion agreements would embed a tiny American flag or some other good housekeeping type seal in their corporate insignia for all to see, just as companies during the Great Depression that agreed to Franklin Roosevelt's recovery plan hung an emblem of a blue eagle in their windows. Alter said companies that don't have the emblem would face the kind of public shaming that has gone out of fashion but could come back with a vengeance. Boycotts, petitions, angry shareholder meetings full of the language of patriotism. I read this and thought it was honestly, I thought it was like
Something
a parody,
from The Onion.
Beck remarked. No one could seriously be considering this, but it's serious. Beck said companies are fleeing America because we have the highest corporate tax rates in the developed world, and they can't afford to continue doing business here. If 47 companies have now left and renounced their citizenship, that should tell you something, Beck said. We're doing something wrong. They are building walls now, figurative walls, to keep American citizens in. The Berlin Wall was not to stop the West Germans from going in, but to stop the East Germans from leaving. President Obama last week denounced the corporate deserters who renounced their citizenship just to get out of paying their fair share of taxes, but Beck said the president's position has nothing to do with his own. Or, wait a minute, it has to do with his own. Please find a way to get this to your friends, Beck told his audience. Don't make this about the president. Don't make this about anything but our values and our principles. If you start arguing about Republicans and Democrats, you will lose. Beck said we don't want to return to McCarthy-era loyalty oaths or the fascist style of governing favored by FDR. Americans, run for your lives, Beck said. This is really dangerous. You have people who are openly saying they want redistribution of wealth. That is socialism. Now you have those same people saying they want nationalism to play a role. That's nationalism and socialism, otherwise known as Nazis. When a country is so mishandled and misrun that they have to build walls, be it virtual or literal walls, to keep not people from coming in, but people from going out, this is a sign a country is about to go very dark, Beck said. There is so much in this article.
And you're always told, excuse me, mostly from those on the left, that Nazism emanates from the right.
No, it doesn't.
It's National
the Nazis,
Socialists.
And you're starting to hear that a lot now, about Nazism being from the right. Or, excuse me, communism from the right.
Really?
Well, no, actually, hang on. No, this guy said, yeah, I heard it referred to, Nazism referred to the right. It's kind of interesting because the Nazis went out of their way during World War II to paint the communists as being from the right.
Well, yes, they did. In the 1930s, the only difference between really the Nazis and Stalinist communists was that Stalin and the communists said, workers of the world unite. Hitler said, workers of Germany unite. One was nationalist, the other was more of a bigger picture world communist.
Okay, let's real quick history lesson here. Where do the terms left and right come from? They started during the French Revolution. They would meet, the government would meet, they'd have two groups. They had the left was comprised of something known as the States Generale, which was, that group represented the interests of the people. Then on the right, they had the people who, the group, and I can't recall what their name was, but they represented the interests of the businessmen. No, not the Jacobians, no. This is before all hell broke loose, that this was like that. Now, starting to sound familiar? Okay. When I say they represented the interests on the right of the businesses, basically they were asking for less government so that business could thrive. Starting to sound familiar now? And on the left, it was all about the people. Starting to sound familiar? That's where our two concepts of liberalism, what's called liberalism now, and conservatism came from, or progressivism and conservatism, whatever. Left, right, progressivism / liberalism left, conservatism right.
I'd say you and I are classic liberals.
Mm-hmm.
Liberals, the way it's used today, liberals are not liberals. They don't really.
No.
Liberal. When I think of liberals, I think in the Jeffersonian sense of the word.
And here's the thing about it. If you are an adherent to a leftist type of philosophy, you have more in common with a communist and a Nazi than you do with a conservative. Because communism and Nazism were totalitarian philosophies. In other words, they wanted more and more government, more and more regulation, more and more jackbooted thuggery, all that kind of stuff.
I think if you took the right to its extreme, you would have anarchy. Is that about? Would you say?
Yes, exactly. It's exactly what it is. Taking the right to the extreme is anarchy. Taking the left to the extreme is total statism. Totalitarianism, exactly. And that is the difference between the two. So to say that either communism or Nazism is a rightist philosophy is wrong. It's totally wrong, no matter who's saying it.
And the left always co-opts the language, because if they said what they really mean, you'd be running.
We talked about this last week. Honestly, yeah. And they want, Kevin and I were talking about the difference between the communists and the Nazis during World War II, and the difference was the Nazis just want to, what was it you said? They want to take over Germany, and the communists want to take over the world? Mm-hmm. It's pretty much it. It's just a difference in degree and scope.
Exactly. You know, when we were kids, I remember that companies would flock to the United States because of our low taxes. As a matter of fact, the Beatles fled England because of their high tax rates.
So the Stones, they moved to France.
Yeah.
They lived in France for many years.
Now, what's France got? 80%? What are they?
That's ridiculous. Well, you live in a country where you have 10 million weeks of vacation every year. Come on. Do they ever work? And they have only a 30-hour work week or something like that?
I've got a little funny story. Years ago, I was stationed in Germany back in the 1980s, and the Germans, they're socialist, and they have very strong work unions, labor unions, and it was some German company had won a bid to paint our barracks, and their union contract said that the maximum amount of rooms that they could paint on any given day was 2. So one day during lunchtime, I walked into my room, and there was 2 of the painters. One was sleeping on my roommate's bed, the other was sleeping on my bed with a bottle of beer on the floor next to him. And I woke him up. I said, "What are you doing?" He said, "Our union rules state that we have an hour lunch, and that and I use mine by taking a nap." I said, "Well, that's my bed there." He said, "Okay, whatever." So I thought that was funny.
Unbelievable. That's what happens with collective bargaining. But what I'm learning to do is, whenever you have someone make these ridiculous accusations or imply something ridiculous or whatever, I say, prove it. That's what I've been saying. Prove it, because you know what? They can't. They can't defend what they're saying, because and I'm going to say this, until someone shows me something different, I'm going to continue believing this. People who adhere to leftist philosophies and forms of government speak from emotion. People who embrace things from the right, such as conservatism, speak from knowledge, rationalism, facts. That is the difference. The problem is, facts sometimes are really hard. It's really difficult to refute someone from an emotional that's arguing from an emotional standpoint with facts, because they'll start yelling, they'll start talking over you and everything. Yeah, that's what they're all based on.
Debating with a liberal, you should have a stopwatch you just watch the stopwatch and see how long it takes them before the ad hominem attacks begin, the personal attacks, because someone who's arguing through emotion, and it inevitably turns to personal attacks, because it has to, because your system is so emotionally wound up that it eventually you strike out.
Yeah, they have no choice, because they can't back their opinion up with facts. You'll have some that will. I mean, as an example, we're leaving for lunch one day last week. I think I might have brought this up. And one of these guys I work with, he's like 30, and he's all pro-Obama and all blah blah blah. He goes, "Oh, look, this just came over the news. 16 members of the George W. Bush administration, including him and Dick Cheney, are up on charges of starting an illegal war in Iraq." I said, "Who's bringing them up on charges?" "Oh, the World Court." I go, "Whatever." Yeah, they have some power.
I've got a friend that I've known for a long time who's a very, very liberal lawyer. And he posts a whole lot on Facebook. And almost all of his posts aren't what he believes. It is more of attacks on conservatives. I like to, when I post stuff on Facebook, I like to tell you basically what I think, how I see the world, with an article, whether it's man-made global warming or what's going on the border. So, I like to, pretty much send out informative articles. He sends out things like, nah, you suck.
Well, that's all they can do. I mean, and the same guy, it's like, well, did you hear what your buddy Bush did? Or did you hear what they say about your buddy? But it's like, whatever. Who says George Bush is my buddy?
He hasn't been president in 6 years. Furthermore, he wasn't one of my favorite presidents anyway. If you want to look at what started our border problem, look at George Bush.
Well, yeah. Well, actually, it kind of goes back to Reagan.
But he made it bad.
Yeah,
as a governor of Texas, you would think he would have been a little bit more vigilant on the border. I think he just turned it the other cheek and just kind of ignored it.
Well, and then another guy yesterday says, "Oh, did you hear they're bringing John Hinckley up on murder charges for Jim Brady died." And he says, that was during when they tried to kill your hero, Ronald Reagan. I said, well, yeah, he is my hero, but was it necessary to throw that in? I mean, what were you hoping to accomplish by throwing Ronald Reagan's name in?
It's not like he's going to get out anyway.
No. I mean, I think it's a whole silly. I'm no friend of John Hinckley's. I think it's stupid, though. Why bother?
Yeah, well, we're always barraged with symbolism these days.
And it wouldn't surprise me if it was Sarah Brady bringing it up because she's still on her high horse and everything. You got to lay hands off her for a few months though, because she just lost her husband. So, unfortunately, could it be the fact that maybe he was 73 years old had something to do with it?
Well, he was pretty much. He wasn't brain dead, but he was definitely impaired.
Yeah, that didn't stop him from making appearances and stuff. I mean, he couldn't maybe get his words across, but he still has brain, from what I can tell.
Yeah. What now, Batman?
Well, you don't have anything?
Not really. Not as much happened in the world. Well, I found this interesting. And this is, I don't have the article in front of me, but Russian bombers have gone into U.S. space. What is it? 16 times in the last 11 days. Here it is right now. Russian bombers increased flights for the second time since June. Russian nuclear bombers escorted by fighter jets have flown near U.S. and Canadian airspace around Alaska in recent days, prompting precautionary intercepts by American warplanes. You combine that with this nice little ditty right here. It was here. Oh, Russia claims they chased away American subs. And let me pull this up if the Drudge Report is working. All this stuff is ominous because, people are banging the war drums right now. It says Russia's Northern Fleet's anti-submarine forces have detected and forced out a U.S. submarine from Russia's boundary waters, a high-ranking source in Russia's Navy told RIA Novosti Saturday. Novosti means news in Russian, in case you want to know. On August 7, 2014, the patrol forces of the Northern Fleet detected a foreign submarine, supposedly a U.S. Navy Virginia-class one, in the Barents Sea. A seaborne anti-submarine group, as well as an anti-submarine airplane, IL-38, was sent to the region to search and track it down, the source said. The Russian Navy forced the submarine out of Russian waters after 27-minute contact. So, this is more Cold War stuff that we're seeing here.
Well, and speaking on those lines, here's another article. It's from Western Journalism. If what the Secretary of Defense just said is true, World War III could be brewing. It's just a short article. Secretary of Defense Chuck Hagel recently said that he agreed with Poland's foreign minister about a heightened risk of invasion of Ukraine by Russia.
You don't mean Muslim Chuck Hagel, do you?
Yeah, him. To quote Hagel, I think it's a reality, of course it is. When you see the buildup of Russian troops and the sophistication of those troops, the training of those troops, the heavy military equipment that's being put along the border, of course it's a reality. It's a threat. It's a possibility. Absolutely. Hagel went on to say that the longer Russia perpetuates and instigates this tension and the possibility of escalating their activity, it's going to get worse. And we have to be prepared for that. Donald Tusk, the Prime Minister of Poland, had warned that the threat of a direct intervention by Russia into Ukraine is certainly greater than it was even a few days ago. On Wednesday, NATO warned that the number of combat-ready Russian troops near the Ukrainian border had gone from 12,000 to 20,000. That's an increase of about 75%. A Russian defense spokesman attacked the claim, saying that the movements of such forces of thousands of troops and equipment are not possible in such a short time. NATO spokeswoman warned that Russia could use the pretext of a humanitarian or a peacekeeping mission as an excuse to send troops into eastern Ukraine. Hagel also spoke about how the conflict had forced the West to examine the structure of NATO in preparation for future conflict. Anyway, I mean, Putin is not holding back. Putin wants the USSR, the Soviet Union, to be reconstituted.
I was a Cold Warrior in the 1980s. I was stationed on the East German border, monitored Soviet military maneuvers. And let me just state this. We're seeing a reinstitution of the Cold War right now, but with a different feel to it. In the 1980s, 1970s, you had this specter of mutual destruction.
Mutually assured destruction.
In other words, the chances of Russia launching against us and we launching against them was very small because there was no point in it. Now, this has a whole different feel. You don't know who has what anymore. We don't even know if there's a suitcase nuke here in the United States. We don't. I mean, you can have a submarine launch multiple rockets right off our shore. We didn't really worry about that so much in the 1980s because of MAD.
People aren't afraid of us anymore. It seems to me, I recall an article in the last week or two, or hearing something about even Mexico firing onto U.S. soil.
Well, would you be afraid of Obama? I wouldn't be.
No.
Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan? They were afraid of him. Remember bombing?
The bombs drop in 15 minutes.
15 minutes.
This is shortly
after the liberals crazy.
That was shortly after the bombing of Tripoli, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, I was in Europe when that happened. That was
crazy. And Obama. He's too worried about campaign appearances. I'm sorry, folks, but that's all he's worried about. And golfing. And
have you ever seen him golf? Oh, awful.
And he's too concerned about how he looks, his legacy, entirely.
How he looks. If he's worried about how he looks, he was never had his picture taken with on that bicycle with a bicycle helmet and his grandma pants on.
He thinks he looks muy macho.
His grandma dungarees or whatever.
Yeah,
he looked like Urkel.
Yeah, exactly. Without the glasses. But I mean, and this is a man who doesn't understand the Constitution and his constitutionally mandated role. And he's supposedly a constitutional scholar. As a matter of fact, this is something we could probably talk about quite a bit. This is from an AP article I found in the Business Insider. Obama defends use of executive power. The American people don't want me just standing around. President Barack Obama, during a press conference at the U.S. African Leaders Summit on Wednesday, defended his use of executive power as a means to bypass gridlock in Congress. The American people don't want me just standing around twiddling my thumbs and waiting for Congress to get something done, Obama said. The president repeatedly indicated he would prefer to work with Congress to find legislative solutions on a slew of issues, including funding for federal infrastructure projects and the border crisis. However, in the face of what he described as dysfunction in Congress, Obama said he would scour our authority to try to make progress within the bounds of the law. I'm going to seize these opportunities, and that's what I think the American people expect me to do, Obama said. Obama was also specifically asked whether he would take executive action and bypass Congress to eliminate so-called corporate inversions, where companies merge with a foreign business to shift their tax base out of the country. The president, who has repeatedly spoken out against inversions, said he could not solve the entire problem administratively, but he said he was examining potential ways to address the issue. There is so much in that short article. First of all, yes, your job is to sit around twiddling your thumbs.
Yep.
That's what we want you to do. Your job is to wait until legislation is passed, sign it into law, and then execute it. Then you use executive orders to help you administer and execute the laws that have been passed, the bills that have been passed into law. Your job is not to use executive orders to pass your own legislation, which is what you're trying to do.
Major legislation. 5 to 6 million illegal immigrants being given amnesty.
You can say that George W. Bush used twice as many or however many it was executive orders.
And they like to throw that up.
Yeah, it's not about the quantity, it's about the quality.
You got it.
What are they being used for? Not how many. And that's exactly what it keeps being brought up. You listen to Fox News, you'll hear Bob Beckel, you'll hear Juan Williams say, well, George W. Bush passed more than he, or used more often than he does. Yeah, but what did George Bush use them for?
And they talk about this do-nothing Congress. They're not do-nothing. They just, you can't get Harry Reid to put anything, to floor anything once it's passed by Congress.
That's part of the checks and balances.
Yeah.
You're not supposed to agree on everything.
No.
You're supposed to compromise, but Harry Reid doesn't even want to compromise.
And did you hear Obama whining last week about that? Oh, he just was sitting there we talked about this last week. He was taunting Congress and basically acting like some
Go ahead, impeach me.
Bully.
Go ahead, impeach me. Go ahead, sue me. And I think either one is a bad thing, suing or impeaching.
Oh, I know what I want to talk about. Does anybody else think this is weird? Now, I'm not heartless, mind you, but was it kind of bizarre that we brought these two doctors back to the United States who had Ebola? I mean, that's creepy.
Mm-hmm. Very creepy.
I mean, it just that makes no sense. If we had the means to treat them, why didn't we go there and keep the Ebola contained in Western Africa?
Not only that, but you told me that in a lot of airports in Europe are letting people from countries that have Ebola outbreaks in without actually screening them.
That's exactly right. And Scott and I think here in the future are going to have a segment of the show, probably at the end of every show, where we make predictions about what's going to happen here within the next week by the time our next show starts. And one of my predictions is, it wouldn't surprise me if during this week somebody in the United States comes up positive for the Ebola virus.
Well, actually, I heard something about someone in New York.
No, they found that to be negative.
Okay,
but it wouldn't. I mean, either through a flight coming in from Africa or through our southern borders. By the way, what better way? Oh, can you imagine? You know those terrorists, whether they be Muslim or what have you, purposely coming down with Ebola and walking into the United States, because I think it has a 24-day incubation period or something like that. Coming in and just infecting whoever they want to. And then dying. It's kind of like a time bomb terrorist.
It's already been documented that there are people from countries that are nowhere near Central America have been coming in during this whole thing through the southern border.
Well, they're seeing, from what I understand, they're seeing signs in both Arabic and Chinese at our borders to giving guidance to whoever's crossing over.
I mean, this is the price we pay. I've said it before, I'll say it again. Elections have consequences.
What if one day a suitcase nuke goes off and it's proven that it came through our southern borders? Is Nancy Pelosi going to apologize? Is Barack Obama going to apologize? Is George Bush, W. Bush, are they going to apologize? I heard one idiot saying that we have a 1,700-mile border and that building a fence is not the answer, that fences never work. Well, it kept a bunch of East Germans at bay for about 30, 40 years, however long it was.
Yep.
Of course it works. It's just you have to have the will to make it work.
It goes back to the fact that people on the left have this thing about moral equivalency. And what I mean by that is, it doesn't matter that our wall is to keep people out, and that the Berlin Wall was to keep people in. It's still a wall. People need to be free. Well,
if you want to talk about walls, what we started with today, as far as aiming the barbed wire of the fence inward, I think that's an interesting metaphor for what they want to do with our corporations as far as not leaving. I mean, that's the equivalent of aiming the barbed wire inward by keeping people in.
It's a figurative.
It's a metaphor. I get it, but
I mean, it's the same moral equivalency that they try to set up between Israel and Hamas, saying that they're morally equivalent. They're not morally equivalent. They are nowhere near morally equivalent. Sure, hey, I don't want to see little kids die. But number one, and I know this is cold, it happens during war. Little kids die. Innocents die. But when you have the people who run your government are putting those innocents in harm's way to get killed, that takes any moral equivalency you might have and throws it out the window.
Yeah, and the Israeli, what was it, ambassador to the UN, I think it was being...
Ron, what's his name? Dermer. Ron Dermer.
Was being interviewed by CNN, and he told her right to her face, he said, all you're reporting is that children are dying, that we're killing children. We are not deliberately killing children. That was with Alison Camerata. Well, it was even before that, there was another...
But speaking of which, what's happened to Alison Camerata since she moved to CNN? It almost makes me think that it's all about the money with her, and with a lot of them. It literally... Okay. They used to have Kieran Chetry, who used to be on Fox and then moved to CNN, and she did the same thing. But with her, you expect it because she was kind of leftist anyway on Fox, if you remember, in her reporting. But Alison Camerata always came out as a pretty solid conservative to me.
I think they're all actors. Who knows really what goes on in their minds? Do they even have anything going on in their minds? Because I think some of them are just readers anyway.
It almost makes you think, though, that they're asked to sign a form that says you will toe the company line.
But don't you think it's odd that? Now it's not odd because we know it for a fact that we're even talking about a political perspective when doing the news. I mean, that's kind of... we shouldn't even be having this conversation because there shouldn't even be a political perspective unless it's commentary. And when you're just reading the news, you're interviewing the news.
But she's not just reading the news. I mean, she interviews people and stuff.
No, I'm just talking about when we're talking about news stations, MSNBC as opposed to Fox, we start talking about ideology. That shouldn't even be there. It should be the news.
Well, yeah, but when you're doing it on the actual opinion shows, though.
Well, yeah, the opinion. That's what I said. Commentary, opinion shows, what have you.
Yeah.
I'm talking about reading the news.
Right.
You know, when you're saying that you're reporting the news as Israel bombed another school and 20-something children died, you're omitting that the reason why they bombed the school was that there were missiles being launched from the school, and that they were using the children as human shields. That's political right there. You're not reporting the news, you're making the news.
Well, yeah, but what you're when they have those headlines and everything like that, they're going for the emotional jugular vein instead of actually reporting, because they don't look at, you know what it is? Lack of context.
The people need the truth.
It's lack of context.
People need the truth. They're
the truth is
they're using the news for political gain.
Well, the truth is the context, though, because a lot of times they're not putting it within context. They're just saying, "Oh yeah, big bad Israelis bombed this school and all these little kids on the Gaza Strip died." Well, have you bothered to investigate why? Or if you have investigated, why haven't you said anything about why they did that? It happened.
And why, after watching this news reportage, since the Gaza thing started, it just stymies me. Why so many Jews are on the left? Why?
That's why that whole thing in Hollywood surprised me. Because most of them are, in most cases, but it's starting to hit home with them now.
Yeah, what's going to have to happen before it starts hitting home again? Was a Holocaust going to have to happen all over again?
Well, Jewish history is notorious for allowing themselves to be put into captivity and for being wiped out, and for the most part, there's always a remnant that gets left behind to start things back up again.
On a lighter note, did you hear Target went gay?
Trying to remember now. No, I just heard something about them with guns.
We talked last week or the week before about the Rainbow Burger at McDonald's.
Yeah.
Target went gay.
How so?
Well, they're getting into the political slugfest, so to speak, of the gay wars and advocating gay marriage and gay this. I don't know that that's the place for a retailer.
Okay. Even if, well, it doesn't matter if it is or not, but okay, why would they do that? Would it be because they want to get more customers? Because I have a feeling that for every gay customer they get to come to their store, they're going to lose about 5 straight customers that are going to go to Walmart.
Well, they did, because people started writing in letters, and I read some of the letters, and they're going to lose customers.
And I'm not saying that's because they don't like gays. The customers don't. They might just they might just have had enough of it.
It's just like, shut up and sell your stuff. Why do you have to come up on the side of anything?
It's like McDonald's doing chicken. Just do your burgers and be happy with it. We don't need to have anything extra.
Yeah, Chick-fil-A was drug in the fray, by the way. He was interviewed, and he was basically hijacked during the interview, asking about his stance on gay marriage, and he simply stated
it's like Phil
Robertson. He was against it.
It's the thing with Phil Robertson with the of Duck Dynasty.
Yeah, they didn't go out of their way to say,
no.
They were asked the question. And Rolling Stone basically laid in wait for Robertson.
Yeah. Come on, it's Rolling Stone.
Well, because they knew he's a born-again Christian, and if you're a born-again Christian, you can't come out on the side of gay marriage. It's anti-biblical.
Just as don't you remember the good old days when MTV played videos? Well, it's just like, remember the good old days when Rolling Stone covered music? They still do, but not.
I don't know if do you want me to read this article about it deals with a Christian worldview? Do you want?
Go ahead, yeah.
Not?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if
we got time. We got about 13 minutes.
I'm not proselytizing here. I just I don't know. This article comes from World Net Daily, which some of you will probably call a far right-wing rag, but whatever. It's called, "Is Your Worldview Truly Christian?" It starts out by saying, Christian philosopher Francis Schaeffer wrote, "As Christians, we are not only to know the right worldview, the worldview that tells us the truth of what is, but consciously to act upon that worldview so as to influence society in all its parts and facets across the whole spectrum of life, as much as we can to the extent of our individual collective ability." A worldview really matters, it goes on, and everyone has one. It is not a question of whether you have a worldview, it is a question of what kind of worldview you have. Our worldview, the way we see life, is formed by a lot of things. It is formed by the culture we are raised in. It is formed by our upbringing. It is formed by the books we read, our education, and the media we expose ourselves to, which is a nice segue from where we just left. The reason our worldview is important is because it is comprehensive. It will affect you and everything that you do, from your personal morality to the way you spend your money, to the way you vote, to the way you live. In his book, Think Biblically, John MacArthur wrote that a Christian worldview is based on 2 presuppositions. The first will be the eternal existence of the personal, transcendent, triune Creator God. Second, the God of Scripture has revealed his character, purposes, and will in the infallible and inerrant pages of his special revelation, the Bible, which is superior to any other source of revelation or human reason alone. There is a living God, and he has revealed himself in the Scriptures. Therefore, as a Christian, I believe that I can find absolute truth from the Bible, regardless of what the culture says, regardless of what is politically correct, regardless of what we feel is right or not right. A Christian bases his or her beliefs on what the Bible teaches. That is what it means to have a Christian worldview, and this will affect the way a Christian sees everything. But a prevalent worldview today is moral relativism. The belief that there are no absolutes and there is no right or wrong. Moral relativism teaches that we are all products of the evolutionary process. Yep, a little Darwinism in there. That we are not made by a creator God, that there is no plan or purpose for our lives. Moral relativism says there is no good, there is no evil, and that we make our own luck and create our own fate. It says we are all basically good, and if we happen to go bad, then it is because we are simply products of our environment. Nothing's our fault.
Nope.
The funny thing about people who accept moral relativism is that they are very tolerant of everyone except people who have absolute beliefs. Then they suddenly become very intolerant. If you dare to stand up and say, well, I believe that the Bible is the Word of God, instead of saying that you have your truth and they have theirs, they will call you a narrow-minded bigot. There is no tolerance for a view like that in our culture today. Moral relativism may sound fine in theory. I have my truth, you have your truth, and your truth is not necessarily my truth. But what if we were to put it into practice? What if we went out tonight and removed all the traffic lights and stop signs and painted over all the lines in the streets? The next morning it would be chaos, and that is what moral relativism is doing to our culture. If ever there was a time Christians need to know their Bibles and have a close walk with Christ, that time is now. Listen to this description of the end times given to the Apostle Paul. This is quote. This is from Timothy, 2 Timothy. People will love only themselves and their money. They will be boastful and proud, scoffing at God, disobedient to their parents, and ungrateful. They will consider nothing sacred. They will be unloving and unforgiving. They will slander others and have no self-control. They will be cruel and hate what is good. They will betray their friends, be reckless, be puffed up with pride, and love pleasure rather than God. They will act religious, but they will reject the power that could make them godly. Is that not an accurate description of the times in which we are living? Some years ago, this gentleman goes on, I read the transcript of an interesting interview of Marilyn Sewell, a Unitarian minister and a self-described liberal Christian. It was done by Christopher Hitchens, who was a renowned atheist, by the way, who just passed on a year or so ago. Mm-hmm. She said, I don't take the stories from the scripture literally. I don't believe in the doctrine of atonement, that Jesus died for our sins, for example. Do you make any such distinction between fundamentalist faith and liberal religion? Hitchens responded, and this is an atheist, he says to her, I would say that if you don't believe that Jesus of Nazareth was the Christ and Messiah, and that he rose again from the dead, and by his sacrifice our sins are forgiven, you're really not in any meaningful sense a Christian. Now, this is an atheist admonishing a quote-unquote Christian. It goes on. He could define what a Christian believes, while the liberal Christian could not. I thought, what's wrong with this picture? It is this kind of sloppy thinking that has crept into the church today. People have a lot of crazy ideas about God. Our country was founded on what we call Judeo-Christian principles. Many of our founding fathers were professed believers in Jesus Christ. Although revisionists have tried to change that narrative, a careful study of history will show that it is true. In 1776, Patrick Henry wrote, it cannot be emphasized too strongly or too often that this great nation was founded not by religionists but by Christians, not on religion but on the gospel of Jesus Christ. For that reason alone, people of other faiths have been afforded freedom of worship here. And it ends by saying, a biblical worldview is believing there is a God as revealed in the Scriptures, and the Scriptures alone are the authority and source of that belief. It is not what we feel. It is not what is popular. It is not what is acceptable. It is not what is perceived as cool. It is what the Bible says. And when we come up with our own version of God, then we are essentially making a God in our own image.
Well, first, 2 points I have to make here. First of all, Unitarianism is not Christian.
No.
I think it's pretty clear that God is three people in one God. And number two, especially not to believe in the atonement, that is not Christian. That is the whole purpose of Jesus coming to the earth, and that's a documented fact. It's a historical fact that Jesus came to earth, or that he existed on earth.
Well, ask that to any of the royals. They think they're descendants of his, and Mary Magdalene.
I know, but it's well, it's nothing new under the sun. That's happened back in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th centuries too. That kind of crap.
What's the Bible also say, that judgment begins in the house of
I believe so.
The Lord, yeah, and that's what we're seeing. You're seeing the Osteens. What's his name? Not Bano. What's his
Joel
Osteen and so forth. Basically, feel good Christianity, not teaching the God. Gospel isn't all feel good. There are repercussions to what you do on this earth.
It's like Jesus himself said. I have come, to paraphrase, I don't remember the exact wording of it, but it said, I've come to put father against son, mother against daughter, blah, blah, blah. In other words, what he's saying there is, there's going to be some that believe in me, there's going to be some that don't. It might be both ways within one family. So they'll put people against each other. The truth has a funny way of doing that. And that's all we're talking about here is truth. I mean,
but so much of our church these days is church light. These mega churches. Oh, you think you're walking into a rock concert.
It's churchianity.
I'll never forget. We come from pretty religious family, Episcopalians, Catholics. pretty much the same. And one year, my aunt came out from New Jersey for the holidays, and we went to this one church called Christ Church of the Valley, which is a huge mega church.
I went there for a while.
Mega church, and there's not a cross in the whole place. And after the service was done, they have like 6 or 7 different church services, and they usher you in, usher you out, like it's like a
fast food.
It's a production. So we're leaving, and my aunt starts walking fast, and I said, "Where are you going, Aunt Carol?" She says, "I'm going to a real church." That wasn't church. That was I don't know what it was called. Did you notice there wasn't even a cross anywhere to be found in that? And that's an Episcopalian admonishment.
And I went there for quite a while. I went there how long ago? About 6 months, maybe. And I just had to get out of it. I also had some of the worst experiences I've ever had in my whole life in a church there, where it was just. And one of them, I was literally in tears over what happened to me there. One time, I won't go into it. It doesn't need to be gone into, but literally, I was accused of stuff that I never even did, and I was thrown out of a group from that church. And luckily, I did maintain a friendship with 2 of the people that were in that group, still to this day.
I have a friend who goes to that church only to get business contacts. Pretty much.
That's all it's about.
Yeah.
I mean, this is how people use the church, or, well, churches or whatever, Christianity. I got a friend, Kevin and I know, grew up with, went to high school with. About 10 years ago, I tried to go to work with him, for him. It didn't work after about a month, but he had a son who, they started going to this one Episcopal church downtown to become members of it, just so they could send their son to their school there, because it was a good school and you had to be a church member.
I don't know if many of you out there know, there's a gentleman out there, his name's Steve Quayle. He's a fundamentalist person, and he refers to the leaders of some of these churches as the pukes in the pulpit. The pukes in the pulpit, because they're preaching everything except the gospel in the word.
I mean, it's like that church Kevin was talking about, Christ Church of the Valley. They it's like they've got a program for this, they got a program for that, they got a program for whatever. And I said, how about a program about leading people to God?
I dated a woman who went to that church and tithed, and she made 6 figures, so she donated a lot of money to that church. And I said to her one day, I said, "Why do you give so much money to that church?" And she says, "Well, imagine if I didn't." And I said, "What do you mean by that?" She said, "Well, my salvation is tied up in that."
Oh my God, really?
And I said, "Girl, you need to read the Bible. Your salvation is tied up in your acceptance as Jesus Christ as your Savior, not by how much money you give to a church." I thought Martin Luther took care of that, during the Reformation. But that's how some people think. You can't fake this stuff. There's only one person who knows your heart, and giving money ain't gonna just giving money ain't gonna cut it. There's nothing wrong with giving money to the church. I'm not saying that, but if you tie it up with your salvation, I think you're misled.
It's all about why you're giving money to that particular church. Yeah. If it's from the kindness of your heart. I mean, that's what the New Testament is. When people accept Jesus as their Savior, they get a new heart, they have a new heart, and they're going to want to give. Exactly. That's why in the Old Testament, tithing was mandated in the law, because people had to have it in law, so they do it. Now, in the Christianity, when Jesus comes in your heart to live inside of you, your body's his temple, it comes as second nature. And
if you find a church you like, the pastor that just really hits home with you, you're going to want to support that. You're going to. Those guys don't just make money just by preaching. They have to have support.
Exactly. Well, I guess that about wraps it up.
I know we got a little bit preachy there, but I think that
it's truth. Truth is truth.
It is truth, and I think the times we live in demand it.
Yes, they do. Anyway, guys, sorry about the. If you're listening to this on the rebroadcast later this week, we missed the first 5 minutes because I forgot to press the record button. I caught it in time, though. All right, guys, we'll see you next Saturday at 11 o'clock. Bye-bye.
God bless.